of things that people go through. وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ. And this nar is fueled by people, fueled by stones, fueled by all these things. عَلَيْهَا مَلَائِكَةٌ شِدَادٌ غِلَاظٌ. عَلَيْهَا مَلَائِكَة. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that there's malaika in charge of it, etc. And amongst the things that He describes the malaika with, Allah says, لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُم. They do not deviate from Allah's instructions. طبعا this talks about now one very important thing, which is يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, O you who believe, you are not just responsible for yourselves, but you are responsible for your families as well, for your children, for your families. Save them from that agony or from that punishment that awaits those who don't follow the Creator's instructions. Inevitably so. Oftentimes, people think when we talk about the deen, we want to protect people from a bad end in the akhirah. People think that the deen is basically something for your next life, and it's meant to take care of you and your family in the next life. What they miss is that a big picture is that the deen is meant to save you in the dunya before the akhirah. For if it doesn't save you in the dunya, it won't save you in the akhirah. The deen is a necessity for your dunya before your akhirah. Akhirah comes. And therefore, when we teach the deen, we talk about the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, we're talking also about, firstly, about the dunya of the people. First. The other one, Allah says, إِنَّهُ ظَنَّ أَن لَن يَحُورَ. They thought that this life that they were living will never end. It'll always be the same. They will never die. Death only comes to other people around them, but it doesn't come to them. And the situation that they know to be as is, it will always stay as such. Anyway, Al-Quran Kareem comes and says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ. Do yourself a favor and protect yourselves and your children, your families, from nar. طبعا in Islam, that's why when we say Allah commanded you to protect not just yourself and your children, your family, Al-Quran Kareem then in return asks the children, right? What do you do? رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Ya Allah, forgive them, for they have put the effort in what? In bringing me up. Rabbayani, they've given me the tarbiyah while I was young. Yani they did not abandon me or outsource my tarbiyah to someone else. Rabbi irhamhuma, Ya Allah, grant them rahmah, just like they have given me tarbiyah as I was growing. That's a return. في تقابل, yani there is one here, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. O you who believe, save yourself and your families, your children from nar. And the other one then, you've saved them. So guess what? Now, as a return, they recognize that, and Allah commands them to be grateful and thankful and praying for their parents. And that's why you see, for example, Al-Quran Kareem, and in the old days, let's say, in the old days, when, let's say, traditionally speaking, irrespective of religion, traditionally speaking in the old days, the man worked, the woman worked. So, of Of course. The man worked outside, the woman worked inside. Both were very tough. The man worked outside to bring a loaf of bread to the house. The woman worked inside to transmit the values and the tradition and the faith and the principles to the children. It's sort of like making them day by day. It's as if you have a product and it takes 10, 20 years to make, and it's a daily thing. And both parents traditionally were involved, but the mother was involved most, since the father had to take a leave of absence for some hours during the day outside of the house to bring a loaf of bread for the family. The mother was then busy in transmitting the value of the couple and their families to the children, making them day by day until they grow. Al-Quran al-Kareem depicts this on Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. In his case, where Allah says, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. You will be, tusna means you'll be manufactured, kind of. As if the Quran says, you will be made day by day under our direct care. Tusna is when if you make a car, you say, I'm making a car. Sana'a yasna'u. Masna' means a factory. Al-Quran uses this term for the upbringing of the family and the children specifically. And therefore you see an example that's very moving in the Quran. ضرب الله مثلا للذين كفروا. Al-Quran Kareem says an example of for those who don't believe, امرأة نوح وامرأة لوط. The woman of Nuh alayhi salam, Nabiullah, and the woman of Lut alayhi salam, Nabiullah. Right? I mean, how close can you get to a Nabi alayhi salam? Any Nabi, being a Sahabi, being a companion, being the wife of the Prophet himself. So here the example, Allah says, ضرب الله مثلا الذين كفروا امرأة نوح وامرأة لوط كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا. They were wives of two of our slaves or two of our creations. فخانتاهما. They betrayed the amana. It means they did not really uphold the principles and the vision and the mission and the faith of Nuh and Lut alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Allah says, just because they were the wife of Nuh and the wife of Lut, Nuh and Lut could not help them. There's no connection like this with Allah Azza wa Jal. I have another way. Meritoriously, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And look at another example. The ayah after it, right away. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا امْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ. Notice now. We have an example of the woman of Nuh alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, and the example of the woman of Fir'aun. The woman of Nuh and the woman of Fir'aun. Who did the woman of Fir'aun raise in her house? Musa salawatullahi alayhi, al-Kareem. Allah Azza wa Jal put the Rasul to be Musa alayhi salam to be raised in the house of who? In the house of Imra'at Fir'aun, a woman of faith, a woman of principles. Notice. And therefore you see the product also in Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. You see the product. Another example now, Imra'at Nuh. What happened to the son of Nuh? You know what happened to the son of Nuh. The son of Nuh alayhi salam, when Allah Azza wa Jal asked Nuh to board the ark and all this, they all boarded, the people with Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, but his son did not board. قال سآوي إلى جبل يعصمني. The son of Nuh, the tarbiyah of the wife of Nuh. Musa, partly the tarbiyah of Imra'at, the wife of Fir'aun, And notice how that is manifested in the generation after. Whatever generation they bring, it's manifested. And today we face a different story because number one, that traditional role is gone. And the deconstruction of the traditional role of the family is gone, mostly. The children's tarbiyah, children today may not be related to their parents ideologically, culturally, or even traditionally. And the reason for that is very simple. The parents did not raise them. The deconstruction of the values, including faith systems and traditions in the past century and this century, ensured to disconnect children from their families and outsource the education and upbringing of the children to others. And as the human being is a product of their environment, whatever that human being is fed, they will grow up carrying. That's why the idea was that the mother, yes, in the traditional path, channeled the values and channeled the principles, but all that to the child, but all that was based on the book of Allah, something firm, something solid on a foundation. That is the book of Allah and the authentic sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like when now we take out, obviously, deconstruction of religion also meant what? To take religion out of the equation entirely, and we can replace it with other things. Whatever you want to call it. You can call it nice things, you don't want to call it nice things, but obviously, as you all know, the human evolution so far, in the sense of the social evolution, really the human being did not change much. What changed is the presentation of it. The human being was from the beginning violent oftentimes, and the human being is still violent towards their fellow brother. They could use politics, religion, sectarianism, whatever it is, to belittle, exploit, and also enslave their fellow human beings. So this was the beginning, and we are until today there. The world is very unstable, as it always has been. Some people may say, oh, well, now there's maybe war going on in Europe, in Ukraine. There is the Middle East, is wars everywhere. People are killing each other everywhere. There's India, there's Pakistan, there's China, there's this. Well, the world has always been going through all this turmoil, because usually what governs many of these things is not really human values, nor human rights, nor faith systems. What governs these things is greed, selfishness, envy, and these things oftentimes are cloaked with religious rhetoric to now mobilize the masses. But what happened to him, so since the human being hasn't really changed much, what has changed is the presentation of the human being. Today, things are presented nicely. For example, you could deconstruct faith systems and alienate them by bringing something that you call human rights, which you make a religion. If you don't believe in it, and it's a mutually exclusive belief, you have to believe in it, otherwise you're no good. And through making, I'm not saying that faith systems are against human rights, no. Faith systems, especially Islam, I only can talk from what I know. Islam speaks about justice. In Allah ya'muru bil 'adl. Justice for all. Equality for all. That all human beings are equal. That everyone is radically equal before the creator of all. That people ought to treat each other justly. Ihsan, Allah commands. We've spent the whole month on it. Right? Allah commands us to be excellent, to excel, not just to remain at justice, but to go beyond and do good to those who don't do you good, and give to those who deprive you, connect those who sever you. It's just the way it is. Like sometimes, often, many things, you deconstruct faith, and you remove faith entirely from a source of upbringing of the children, and in that point, you can put under any label and then feed those children from social to political to religious to economic, whatever theory, and they become carrying this theory thinking that's what it is. And therefore, the job of religion oftentimes is to ensure that the human beings are connected to something that's not variable, غير متغير. And that is something that's not variable is Allahu Rabbul Alameen. The Quran in that sense, someone that's not subject to change, something that is higher than all this, and something that is not subject to change throughout the political winds or the economic winds or the social winds that's changing. The religion is supposed to connect you to the creator of all, so you are not simply seeing a one way, but you're seeing actually things, and not seeing one way only, reduced vision in a reduced place, reduced time, but you're actually seeing things from the beginning till the end, and things where you're in and things where you're out, in the sense that you see yourself part of a creation and part of a movement. يا أيها الإنسان إنك كادح إلى ربك كدحا فملاقيه. Oh human being, you are going to your Lord eventually. You are just walking, whether you know it or not. You're going there. The idea is then to give a wake up to the human being that there could be many political, social, economic, and other philosophies that human beings want to force indoctrinate and force inject into the human beings. But the Quran comes and tells you, well, all right, there could be good, human beings can do good, and human beings can do sometimes not so good. Make sure that this is consistent with your foundation. Make sure you know your orientation. Where are you now? What's your 1020? Where are you from? Where are you going to, and why? You got to ask yourself that question so you are not lost in the mayhem of currents that are facing the human beings. And that's why, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum. Oh, you will believe. You have to shield yourself. Shield. Wiqaya is shield. Shield yourself and your children, your families, from agony, from nar. Because the dunya can also have agony and nar, not just the akhirah. And that's why Islam involves people in from the beginning of their children all the way till marriage. Even in marriage, you have to choose. You help choose who do you want to bring to your family. You choose the traits and the characters you want to have in your family and in your grandchildren. You're part of that choice, because Islam does not look at it as an individual, that marriage is an individual thing that is disconnected from a wider social utility. Marriage in Islam is an act of worship, first and foremost, not just a social utility. Anyway, today, obviously, since the deconstruction, there's no more, we don't know who's raising the kids. Well, maybe we know. All these gadgets and all these screens and all these, and social media and all these things. And obviously, when we disconnect the children, unplug them from being connected to their creator, in the sense of also balancing their information, and we connect them to everything else. It's just like what the poet said. وَأَلْقَاهُ فِي الْيَمِّ مَكْتُوفًا وَقَالَ حَذَارِ حَذَارِ أَنْ تَبْدَلَّ بِالْمَاءِ. Yani like someone who tied his hands and feet and threw them in the sea and told them, be careful, don't get wet now. You're going to die, not get wet. Most likely you're not going to make it unless you swim like a mermaid. That's part of the responsibility. A loaf of bread does not suffice from the intellectual and the spiritual bread that the children have. Otherwise, like I said, we're going to end up with a generation that the parents don't recognize entirely. And this is where we have the responsibility of the community, individually and collectively. One can say, look, Shaykh, the situation is already difficult, it's beyond control. Adults are being corrupted. What are you talking about? And nothing is stable. You all know, the world is no longer, has not been stable ever, and nor will it ever be stable. Bosnia, you all know what happened to it some years ago, right? Thousands and thousands of people. They wrote about 8,000 some people's names. Those are missing. Today you're having probably a replay. Nationalism is rising on the Serbian side. They want to, tear down the country and all these things. And you see what's happening now today with the Ukraine. You see what's happening in Asia. You see what's happening in all these things. The human being still thinks that the only way to solve problems is through violence and annihilation of their opponents. That's the only way. There is the logic of power, but the power of logic is missing almost entirely. Again, this is where the role of the religious systems, faith systems comes in and tries to sort of put that the power of logic is much more important than the logic of power. Because this life is not all there is. And no matter how long you live, this life is finite. It will end one day, and one day we will go to the next life. And we as people, communities of faith, we do believe in an actual court. Meaning, while Muslims obviously are law-abiding citizens, we believe that there ought to be a justice system that's fair where we go in this world and we are judged. But nevertheless, we never believe that this is the ultimate judgment. The ultimate judgment is only Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate judge. Why? Because lots of people who are oppressed in this world, they are called innocent, and lots of innocent are called oppressors. And vice versa. And lots of truth are packaged as wrong, and lots of wrong is packaged as truth. And today, again, as a community of faith, part of not just our existence, which we ought to really look at as a community of faith, because if you just surrender to all these influences, eventually no community of faith will exist. It will be the end of history as we know it. It'll be the end of human civilization as we know it. Might as well call it eventually the emergence of new world, where there's one culture, and in that culture, actually it's a religion entirely, because that's all there is. Because other than that, you're just weird. Because I'm awesome anyway. There is no room for constructive criticism anymore. Because it shouldn't exist. Al-Quran Kareem now, so if we can't do it collectively, we have a job to do it individually. And to ground ourselves, that's basically what the ayah is saying. Ground yourself, protect yourself, shield yourself. It's shielding as if, you're getting bombarded from every which direction. And the only way to shield yourself is by grounding yourself and your children and your family to the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, to the everlasting that's not subject to change. And the everlasting that's not subject to change brought us universal values. When we talk about justice, it's a universal value. It's a universal human value. I don't need to believe in a new religion called humanism so I can understand that I need to treat the other person that I disagree with about everything justly. I don't need to renounce my faith so I can treat those who I disagree with religiously and politically and economically and socially fairly and in total equity before the Creator. I think that our faith empowers us with these values. But again, I have always said that, and I keep saying it. In our masajid, in our Muslim organizations, in the West specifically, we have often reduced our faith to fiqh, which is law, and we teach Islam the way law schools teach law students. Do, don't, halal, haram. So we came up with an understanding of, that's why you see people when oftentimes, especially young generation, when they talk about Islam oftentimes, they talk about it from a perspective of law. missing out on the entire philosophical understanding of Islam, about philosophical of life, the understanding of Islam of death, the understanding of Islam of family, the understandings of Islam and the maqasid and the objectives of Islam, on many things, on friendships, on relationship, on mission in life, on job in life, on education in life, on interactions in life, on neighbors, on relationships with Muslims, with non-Muslims, with everyone, with animals, with nature, with all this. We've reduced things to law, and that's why we became rigid. And that's why you obviously, once you become like that, you know, I mean, lawyers are great people and all. Don't take me wrong, maybe not, but you know, many of them are, many of them. But rigidity. Today we need to look at what is expected of us vis-a-vis our children. And what can we do actually to ground our children individually and collectively to that which is non-variable. And I'm not talking so they can be scholars of this deen or they can be da'iyah of this deen. No. So they can actually have a decent life, a decent dunya and a decent akhirah. The idea is not for everybody to be whatever. You can be whatever you want to be all you can be, like the army says, right? But I mean, you gotta aim high also, like the Air Force says. Aim high means you gotta do something where you protect and shield your children from all these bombardments and currents that the dunya is giving them, so they can sail in a decent way in the dunya. And this is not something new. This happened to the children at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the children at the time of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and Tabi'een. The continuation of the existence of communities of faith hinges on the second generation. And when you look in the masajid and you don't find the second generation, you don't find them involved passionately, that means the job at home was not done. And you know, you can put them on Iman IV all you want, and Sunday schools all you want, but it's not going to cut it. There has to be involvement orchestrated on an individual and on a community level in order to get them involved, because the time is theirs, not ours. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu qu anfusakum. Al-Quran Kareem tells us, qu anfusakum, shield yourself. And this is our responsibility, the parents and also those who don't have children. Still, other people's children are like your children anyway. You're part of this ummah. And therefore, the well-being of everyone is also your primary concern, not your secondary concern. Today, we need to enact the tarbiyah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which means that we teach people the tawheed, obviously, but we also teach them the applied tawheed. Yani tawheed, you believe Allah Azza wa Jal is one, that's all seeing, that's all powerful, that's all hearing. But the applied tawheed means that you don't want to lie because Allah sees you, the one that is almighty and all seeing and all hearing. The applied tawheed means you don't want to cheat because the all seeing sees you. The applied tawheed means that you live this world trying to do better. Yes, we will all make mistakes. Me and you and all of us, we are all sinful. We will make mistakes. But the applied tawheed ought to teach us that if we don't improve, we don't become better tomorrow than we are today, then our tawheed is defective in its application. Tawheed is not like what we made it, especially in the last 40, 50 years, abstract information and data that we simply teach the children and make them repeat. And they've repeated, they've memorized it backwards even. But fruitless in the sense of application. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم فاستغفروه. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا كما أمر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له إرغاما لمن جحد به وكفر. أشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم الشفيع المشفع في المحشر. صل اللهم وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله أهل الفقه والنظر والعلم والأثر وعلى من بآثاره مقتفى واهتدى واعتبر. If anything makes me sad today, and lots of things in the dunya are good and there's hope, and lots of things in the dunya are saddening. Today, with all these things that are happening in the world still, you look at the children. Who is suffering most? You've seen the children that are dying in these refugee camps. You've seen some pictures maybe surfacing around because in Jordan, in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Syria, children are they're freezing to death because they're not used to snow. And there was just a snowstorm last week there that killed many children. And those children are refugees. Obviously, they haven't chosen to be part of any war. The same thing in any war that's happening. Look at the children in Yemen. Look at the children in Libya. Look at the children in Iraq. Look at the children in Somalia. Look at the children in Afghanistan. And the list goes long. And now if a war happens also, we'll have to worry about the children in Ukraine, the children in Russia, and the children in all these places. And the children oftentimes are the victims of the big people's games. And Al-Quran Al-Kareem, by telling us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. What it reminds me is with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sahih Muslim, where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every newborn is born on a pure slate, on a clean slate, fitra, absolutely pure. فَأَبَوَاهُ, his parents either lead him to be Majusi, fire worshipper, or Yahudi, or Nasrani, وَإِن كَانَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ فَمُسْلِمٍ. Or if his parents are Muslims, they would lead him to be Muslim. Look how the Prophet ﷺ now in this authentic hadith puts the responsibility of the direction of children on the parents, because they're the first custodians, and everyone is responsible. If they would lead him, everyone is born equally so, clean, absolutely pure. We don't believe in an original sin. No one is born with an original sin. Everyone is born absolutely sinless, absolutely innocent, absolutely pure, absolutely beautiful. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says his parents lead him. فَأَبَوَاهُ, his both parents lead him or her to be this Majusi, Nasrani, Yahudi, and if they are Muslims, some people forget this, but the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there's an addition to the hadith, if his parents are Muslims, he will become Muslim. عباد الله, اتقوا الله العظيم حق تقواه، راقبوه مراقبة من يعلم ويعتقد بأنه يراه. تزودوا من دنياكم لآخرتكم عملا يحبه ويرضاه. اعلموا أنه لا يضر وينفع ويعطي ويمنع ويصل ويقطع ويخفض ويرفع إلا الله. واعلموا أن الله تعالى أمركم بأمر بدأ فيه بنفسه وثنى بملائكة قدسه. قال تعالى: ولم يزل قائلا عليما إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم. بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين، أعلي يا مولانا كلمة الحق والدين. اللهم من أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين خيرا فوفقه إليه، من أراد بهم غير ذلك فاهده يا ربنا سواء السبيل. آت أنفسنا تقواها، زكها أنت خير من زكاها، أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم إنا نعوذ برضاك من سخطك وبمعافاتك من عقوبتك، وبك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب عمل يقربنا إلى حبك. اغفر اللهم لنا ولوالدينا ومشايخنا ومن له حق علينا ولمن على الخير أعاننا وعن الشر أبعدنا، ولمن أوصانا بالدعاء، ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات، إنك يا ربنا سميع قريب مجيب للدعوات. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وآله. أقم الصلاة.